how did you all meet? Is my first question. I know there's quite an interesting story behind this.
I originally met Ben Carlish, who's Natasha's brother, just a guy I got chatting to in a bookshop when I was doing a book signing. I really liked him, had a little bit of time with him. He wanted to be a writer. And a week later, Natasha rang me. I didn't know Natasha. She just said, "Oh, you were really kind to my brother. We'd love to meet you. We're doing documentaries, me and Michael. Do you want to come down to Birmingham and meet us?" And I said, "Yeah, that'd be great." People have been trying to do documentaries about the stuff I was doing for quite a while, so I thought it would be interesting. When I met them, I really liked them. And they said, "Well, while we try and sell this, do you want to do as a short film? Do you fancy doing a bit of drama?" Well, that's what we're going into drama. And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to do that, yeah." So that's where Bouncer came about. Although I said to Michael, "What do you like?" He said, "I like listening to bouncers in gyms talking." So I went and did him a film on psychotic jealousy. And it didn't land very well. And I said to my wife, "I'm not quite sure why it hasn't landed very well." She said, "Well, what did he ask for?" I said, "He said he likes films about bouncers talking in gyms." And she said, "What did you give him?" I said, "The film on psychotic jealousy." She said, "Why don't you just give him what he's asked for?" She said, "You know bouncing, that's your world, that's where you come from." So I went back with Bouncer, which was originally just a monologue. And Natasha and Michael, I was good at monologues, but I didn't really know how to split it into scenes. It was my first film, so they basically held my hand, and as they did with all the films we did, and helped me to put it into scenes. So I knew the dialogue, I knew where the authenticity was and the reality was, but I didn't really know how to structure a screenplay. So that's how we met. And then on the set of, I think it was on the set of Bouncer that I met Ray and Ronnie. And Ray and Ronnie were telling loads of stories about when they were drunk in Scotland, and Ronnie was in AA and NA, and just the way he was talking, you see the way he talks there. I said to him, "Oh, I could do you a film about alcoholism."
That's the next film now, so we're going to save that.
Film. Yeah, I'll save it for that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
from your perspectives, how did how did it go?
I think just to maybe rewind a little bit and just feeling a little bit more detail about what Geoff was doing when we met. And when we met him, and what we talked about making a documentary about was a theatre play, as I remember it, wasn't it? So Geoff had written a play, which was a monologue by a bouncer called One Sock. And I just kind of fell in love with this idea, this detail, actually. The idea that it was called One Sock because at the end of a shift, the bouncer had gone home just with one sock because the other one was covered in blood. And so that's all he had left. And that was a really sort of powerful image to me. And that's what really drew me into it. But the play hadn't gone into production, had it? So that left us with nothing to make a film about, in a way. But then along came Screen West Midlands was just getting going at the time.
So Michael and I have been working together for a number of years on documentaries and decided that we wanted to go into making dramas and short films. We'd made one sort of fairly experimental short film, which had gone well. It was about Broad Street on Friday night, famous iconic Broad Street in Birmingham. And when we met Geoff, I remember there was a real kind of energy to what he wanted to say in the world. And I think as a producer, you were always looking for a kind of really distinctive voice that was coming from a place of experience. Today, I think we would say authenticity. And I'd always felt with Michael's filmmaking that there was something of that in what he was trying to say. So when Geoff came along, I think Michael and I both really recognised that. But yeah, I remember getting the monologue. It was like 18, maybe 17 or 18 pages long. And this opportunity had come to apply to Screen West Midlands for the first round ever of digital shorts. So I think it was like £10,000.
Yeah.
That seems like an awful lot of money now. And then it didn't seem that much to make a short film, although we'll explain about Brown Paper BAFTA later on. That was made for a very small amount of money. And I said to Michael, you know, we might be in with a chance for one of these shorts, but we're going to have to do a lot of work on the script. And I could tell Geoff was so hungry to do that. So, I mean, Michael and I weren't exactly, you know, I'd worked in theatre. Michael had worked in documentaries for a long time before he and I had met. We'd made several documentaries together, but we weren't script experts by any stretch of the imagination. So we really had to kind of feel our way through together. And I think that process really helped build trust.
Yeah. And I think us coming from those two backgrounds, you from theatre, me from documentary, really made it work. Because Geoff's unconventional script writing, if you make documentaries, it's kind of not a problem, because if you make documentaries, you might have gone out and shot loads of material, interviewed people for an hour or two, and then have to make something out of that. So, you know, that was sort of unfazing in a way. And then I think with Natasha's background in theatre, she was able to say, this is a production designer. And I'm kind of like, what's that? But new people who could do that, you know, actually bring a team together. She brought a composer and into the mix as well. So we were able to put together a drama team, because, you know, that sort of translates well from theatre. You know, you have the same things, same team members, if you like, who can cross from one to the other. But I think those two things together meant that we could make something like this really quite, you know, it fitted really well.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
You called it divine networking in other interviews, which I really like. That it gives a sense of magic to the bringing together of talents.
In Manchester when I met Ben, and there was lots of faces there, lots of names, you know, lots of people that had come, because I think I was promoting Watch My Back, a book that I'd done. And as soon as I met Ben, he was working at Waterstones, I think, as a shelf stacker. He wanted to be a writer. He's a really good writer. But I just felt it when I met him. But I had a really busy schedule. I was doing like a 32 city tour, and I didn't know when I could meet him. I said, look, I'm in Huddersfield next week. Why don't you come and spend an hour with me? We ended up spending the morning together. I loved him, got on really well with him. And then I never thought about it again. But I don't, when I meet people with the divine networking, I do whatever it is I need to do and then I move on. I don't expect anything from it, because it can, you know, the return can come from anywhere. So when I got the phone call from Natasha, it took me a minute to click, and then I go, oh yeah, it's Ben, that and there. And so in fact, that serendipitous meeting in Manchester has led to pretty much every film I've ever done since, because it started with Natasha and Michael on that film. They helped me to cut my teeth, and then Brown Paper Bag, and then, you know, that led to onto all sorts of other things.
I think your writing is exquisite in this film. I love how descriptive and rhythmic the narration is, and how compelling those dialogue scenes are. And it's interesting to learn that it was written in a sort of untrained fashion to start with. I think Ray Winstone's voice and cadence is like the perfect soulmate to your words.
Natasha said, who do you want to act in it? I said, I've written it for Ray Winstone, but we only had 10 grand. Ray was on Hollywood money. We hadn't got enough to pay for his, you know, for his tea. But we went to him, and of course, once we got Ray, we got Sean Parks, and we got Paddy Considine.
We'll hold that thought, because I'm going to come to Ray in a few minutes. We've got one more question for you. So the question is, can you tell us a little bit more about your writing process? Your writing process for short film in particular. What is it you are looking for? What are you aiming for?
Well, I'm always aiming for truth. I'm aiming, because the guys I worked with when I was a bouncer, they could tell the same stories every night, and you would sit and listen to them all the time. You'd sit and listen to them forever, because they're so funny, so engaging, so authentic, you know. And I just wanted to try and capture that. I remember when we first went to Screen West Midlands, and they said that it was loquacious, but it was pejorative the way they said it. They didn't say it in a nice way. They said it was too wordy, and I said, you know, that's how it is. That's how people are. That's how people talk. I want to try and capture that, how people talk, make it really authentic. So it's, obviously watching it again, it's quite a shock because it is massively inappropriate, but it's so true to how it was, so real, Yeah. So I just try to capture what I think if I've got if I've been graced anything, it's the ability to be able to hear a voice and then be able to find, like with Ronnie, I could hear his rhythm. In my head, I could hear Ray's rhythm and I could write something to that rhythm. That's why I didn't like to take any words out of the scripts I wrote, because it breaks the rhythm. It doesn't serve if anybody else puts other words in or if actors play around with it. And it's not about being precious, it's about not breaking the rhythm, because there was a pleasantness to the rhythm, something about the rhythm that I really love. And you get someone like Ray. I mean, when we did that monologue, it was great, wasn't it? Just incredible.
Tell us how you got Ray Winston involved in this project, from the kind of whimsy right through to getting him on the set. How did that happen?
Yeah. So this is the first and last time that this has ever happened in my career, which is that we said, let's ask Ray Winston. And he was the first choice. And he said yes. And we made the film. I can think of lots of other instances where we had a first choice. There's a film that we did, I forgot his name there, but anyway, he said yes, but we didn't get to make the film. No, not Eddie Marson. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I can't think of another example where all of those three things happened. And it was the first time that I'd worked with actors. So I was kind of like, oh, this is what it's like. Absolutely not.
Someone said just now in the audience, what swayed Ray Winston? Yeah. I mean, we were very lucky in as much as we had Michael's wife, Yaz, who's in the audience. Her sister was just starting out as a casting director. She was actually a casting assistant to a very famous casting director called Patsy Pollock. And Patsy basically said, look, you can take this on as a film to cast. And Shaheen said, well, they want Ray, and they made it possible, I think, to actually get the script to Ray, or to Ray's agent, Michael Wiggs, I think it was at the time.
And still is.
And still is, which is fantastic. So, it was an extraordinary moment. What really swayed him was the fact that he had always been really interested in bouncers and nightclub boxing and nightclub doormen. And I think he just said, well, if you can film it at this time, it's a very specific little window at the end of February in the freezing cold in Coventry. You don't need to pay me, but any money you would have paid me can go to my driver. It's got to be done over a weekend in 48 hours. I mean, there were lots of stipulations in order for us to make it work. They were like, okay, we'll do anything. And he was the nicest guy. And I think the atmosphere on set was fantastic because he took it really seriously, in as much as he really put himself into it. But at the same time, he made it into a kind of very sort of collegiate, he was very chummy. There was no kind of airs and graces. He wanted it to be the best it could be. He was happy to do more takes. I mean, we were really, really lucky, and it was quite an extraordinary experience. It was before he was mega. He was quite mega. I think he'd already done Nil by Mouth with Kathy Burke, that had won the Palme d'Or in Cannes.
And Sexy Beast, they'd done by then as well.
Done by then. So it was extraordinary. But I think it also kind of spoke to Geoff's writing, and the fact that I think he really saw in Michael's kind of directing something that was really unique and special. And I think he just thought, yeah, I love the script. They're a really interesting bunch of people. Coventry, end of February, bring my driver up. Why not? For us, it was extraordinary.
So you mentioned that you hadn't really worked with actors before, much less a rising star and a British institution at this point. So my question is for you, Michael. How did you approach the direction of actors in this film? You've got lots of overlapping dialogue, and it's very naturalistic.
Yeah.
And obviously, Geoff's already hinted that improv was probably forbidden. So tell us a bit about that.
It was quite nice not having time to think about it in a way, because looking at it now, you're kind of like, oh wow, that's Ray Winston and that's
It's
Paddy
beautiful
Considine
shot as well.
and so on.
Forgot how good you shot it. It's great.
Yeah, and that was important. Again, sort of the lack of time meant storyboarding it was really important, and I did spend a lot of time storyboarding it and going over that. And I guess being just 10 minutes long, you got more time to do that. I remember giving it to because we had an AD called Trudy from the BBC, and she said, "Oh, I've never seen this much preparation go into." There was my little folder with all the shots in it, and what we're going to do, where the camera would be for each moment, so on. So
Very reassuring for me.
yeah,
Like we cannot go over, not even by half an hour, because we've got a lot to do and we've just got this weekend.
Yeah.
Michael worked so hard to try and get it exactly as it needed to be.
yeah, and I think just to mention Phil Javan, the DOP, just very naturalistic shots and framing that we created together. I think there's a mix of influences in it of Scorsese, but also Ken Loach is kind
I
of
was going to say,
cross
yeah.
between the two of those, I think. And that dictates a lot where you put the camera and what your kind of shot size is and things like that. We were compromised at one point when we lost the light. We only had one light, one big light. And that went down, and we did lose quite a bit of time because of that. And Ray wasn't happy about that. And he did want to get back to his hotel.
Do you think that?
So we had to really sort of simplify the sort of big fight scene that's outside.
Do you think Ray's sort of unhappiness with that is raised everybody's game again? Like,
Yes, you were working to a very tight deadline. It just got a lot tight.
Just having him there raised the game of everyone anyway, didn't it?
Yeah.
I was just saying, just having him there raised the game of everyone. Do you remember the time as well? I don't know if you remember, but there was when we were shooting, the phone went off and it was Ray's. He went behind the screen and he picked it up and he goes, "Mr. Scorsese, I've told you not to ring me when I'm working on my short film." And he put it down. And then a few years later, he's working with Scorsese. Isn't that strange? That was really weird. It was funny though.
divine.
Yeah, divine. Yeah, there was a lot going on, but we just believed anything was possible.
Well, you've got the mic. I just wanted to ask about how you three collaborated with each other.
I think as it was quite new to all of us, the script was longer. Michael and Natasha literally shaped it for me into a screenplay, and then it changed again in the edit because I always overwrite. I deliberately overwrite so that you can take stuff out. So, this was all new to all of us. So they tightened it and made it even better in the edit. So that what we've got there is, is really tight. But it was much longer, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it was kind of written 3 times in a way.
Yes.
Once when you write it, once when you shoot it. Like we didn't change much then, and then in the edit, Michael and Natasha changed stuff again, which made it better.
I think there's 2 main things that I remember in 2 of those stages. One, before we shot it, and we needed to do this before we shot it, we changed. There was a lot more of it was in voiceover or monologue, and so one of the major changes we made was to move that into a dialogue scene in the gym, when the 2 of them are in the gym and he's telling the Nietzsche story. Originally, that was also a monologue and voiceover. But then later in the edit, what was good about it being a lot of voiceover is that that's much easier to trim and change and cut down than dialogue scenes in a way. You can, because you're not looking at the person, you can just chop up the voice a lot more and condense it a lot more. And I remember when we were editing it, I was working with an editor called Steve Killick, who's been very much involved with making this new version. And I felt like we sort of crossed this bridge where you were no longer being told things, but you were being shown them. And that was kind of the balance you had to get right with it being voiceover.
You went on to achieve a BAFTA nomination for this film. How does it feel? Like, how did that happen, Natasha? If you could start, how did it happen? Like, what's the route to a BAFTA nomination back then? And how did it feel for all of you?
So back then, I think you had to make a film version of it, which, thank goodness, I think that's completely changed these days. And it had to have shown at a certain amount of A-list festivals. So places like Cannes or Edinburgh or Berlin or Venice, Toronto, Sundance. So it had to be at kind of like these festivals. It had to be on a film version, and I think we really had to sort of beg, borrow, and steal the money. I think we might have got some more money from Screen West Midlands to make the film version, because we didn't have that sort of money.
Which cost about half as much again as the film cost.
Exactly. I mean, you know, now it sounds like
That is in my loft now.
at the time that's what you had to do. So we did that, and you know, I thought it was good. I'd seen quite a lot of short films by that point, but I didn't think, you know, in my wildest dreams, I didn't think we'd get nominated for a BAFTA. And we were actually in the middle of shooting Brown Paper Bag, I think, or we were maybe in the edit of Brown Paper Bag, and that was a whole other story.
Yeah, it would have been, wouldn't it?
And we got the email or the call. I can't even remember how it came to us. And it didn't even seem real at first. And I just remember thinking, you know, that is just extraordinary. And I remember feeling at the time really validated, I think, because obviously, you know, what a lot of people don't see when they see films like that is they don't see all the hours and hours of work that so many people did for absolutely nothing, for no money at all the kind of like hours of work that people put into kind of even thinking about something like that. And of course, for all of us, and for Geoff and for Michael and, you know, Sananda Mugesh, whose office we used, who's all sorts of edit, all sorts of stuff, you know, people who are in the audience tonight who contributed, you know, you feel like that is actually for everybody, really, and also for the West Midlands, which, you know, always had been struggling to be really on the map again. I think that's improved enormously. So it felt like it was a real sort of victory on so many levels for so many people. And obviously actually going to the BAFTAs, you know, people think filmmaking is really glamorous, but, you know, that's probably one of 5 glamorous occasions I was part of over a 20-year career in TV and film, and the rest of it is just graft. So yeah, it was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, there are moments. I was stood outside Scholars, which is the club we shot it in. It was owned by a friend of mine. They let us use the place, and I was with my kids. And I was always telling my kids anything's possible. And suddenly we stood outside watching Ray Winston and Paddy Considine doing lines I'd written. And it was like, to myself, it's like your belief really expands. Anything's possible. So even if you don't get the people you aim for, you try anyway. But if you just put someone like Ray Winston in your mind and go, I'm writing it for Ray Winston, you automatically go to the top of your game to write. You don't throw a weekend script at Ray Winston. You know, you don't do a weekend script and expect Hollywood to call. So, you know, I think just the idea of having somebody like, it doesn't matter to me if I don't get that kind of actor, because, you know, it just matters that I aim for it, so that I know the standards there. And a lot of the stuff I find, if you haven't got a good enough actor, they just can't get the rhythm anyway. So when we spoke to Ray on set, and we were saying to him, you know, what drew you to this? Why did you do this? He said, because he was doing stuff, and I was going, where's that come from? That isn't in the script. You know, just some of his actions. He said, it's all in the subtext. Yeah. But you can't plan subtext. It's got to come through from a place of truth. And I think that's what as you said, asked at the beginning, that's what I'm looking for. I'm just looking for truth. Truth, even when it's ugly, is beautiful.